Hi, everyone.
Hi.
Hello. We have Is Search Still Relevant? 2 o'clock. I'm the moderator of this panel here, and we'll be introducing our panelists here shortly. But I want to kind of introduce myself for those of you who don't know who I am. I'm a Senior Publisher Development Manager here at CJ. I have been on television before, in particular American Idol, as well as Good Morning America. And there's stories for both of those. I'll explain it to you a little bit later. We were asked to find a quote about our session early on, and that's the one that I found. It really does speak to search marketing. Although your time and attention are finite, the demands on your time and attention are infinite. And that speaks to a lot of affiliate marketing. There's a lot of nuances with it, a lot of new and emerging technologies. We only have so much time in our lives. So we want to make sure that we're presenting you with a lot of information, but ways to make your lives better and easier. And this time, it's about search. I've been at CJ. Well, tomorrow will be officially my 13-year anniversary. So at CJ, I have kind of done multiple things. In particular, I was on the advertiser team very earlier on. In particular, I ran the eBay affiliate program in the early days while it was here in CJ. And my primary goal with the eBay affiliate program was around their search marketing platform. I've actually dealt in the very early days of IMWave, one of our panelists here, was one of our top publishers in that program. Most of our publishers in that program were search. Search was a different kind of search back then in the early days. Since 2007, though, I've actually been on the publisher development team, primarily leading the search very early on when we were very verticalized in publisher development. Now we've kind of expanded our portfolios to include multiple business models under one development manager's portfolio. But I've really kept search close at heart. I follow basically every single search blog you can imagine. I read them every single morning. When I started at CJ, when I was doing the eBay program, this is what Google's website looked like. And I remember buying traffic and our publishers buying traffic from multiple logos over there. Most of those don't exist anymore. They exist in another fashion other than search in most of the case. I mean, how many of you had to buy traffic from Lycos and Netscape in the early days? Right? So we have a lot of newer people in this space. Mm-hmm. And that's fine. Affiliate search, though, has evolved, primarily set up by the rules of Google and Bing. In particular, there's 2 things. You can allow your search affiliates to do trademark plus bidding, typically on the coupon deal or the content end, drive traffic to their website and then onto yours. And there's the display URL side, traditional PPC search agency, but you do it in a pay-for-performance model instead of paying for the clicks. We actually have both models represented on our panelists. The old days of affiliate search, that was kind of a hodgepodge. There wasn't really any clear defined policies. Google allowed the same display URL on 20 ads on the same search term. That's why I had so many search publishers on eBay. If you ever search in the early days of Google, you probably saw 50 eBay ads. Those were all eBay affiliates. And they could all live in harmony, all 50 of them. And then one day, Google was basically like, no, one display URL per ad, and things changed. There wasn't a lot of communication between publishers and advertisers at the time, kind of wild, wild west mentality, launch a campaign, see what happens, take it down if it wasn't converting, leave it up, and maybe talk to the advertiser if it was good. And as I said, multiple ads was the other big thing with the old style of search. And I was talking to an advertiser about 4 months ago when we were starting to put together these content sessions at CJU. And we haven't had a content session at CJU about search for quite many years. And so someone asked me, an advertiser asked me, will remain nameless, the question, is search still relevant? My response was, yeah, it is. It definitely is. Search is still a viable promotional method for publishers to drive traffic not only to their site, but also to the advertisers directly, depending on the 2 different types of affiliate search. So without further ado, I want to introduce my panelists here. On my immediate left is Steve Schaefer. He is the founder and CEO of Offers.com. Sitting next to him is Evan Lab, the head of revenue for Savings.com. And there on my far side is Tony Pantano, who is the CEO of IMWave. And we really want to talk about four main subjects of how search has evolved and how it currently is working in the affiliate landscape. So guys, I'm going to ask you the same question. Please answer it in succession, if you will. The first topic I want to talk about is misconceptions. There's definitely seems to be a lot of misconceptions of what is search, how publishers utilize search in this landscape. If you could tell me about the biggest misconception you hear from advertisers or agencies and how you counteract that misconception.
Yeah, my first thought's not really a misconception, but it's more of a misperception. And that is, we'll hear from our partner team that advertisers will often say, well, no, we won't do that, right? And you know, well, why? Well, our search team says no. And then that's it. Sometimes the conversation's over at that point. So I'm not sure I'd call that a misconception as much as a barrier. Fortunately, over the last 18 months, that's happening less and less. So I would say the biggest misconception outside of that is probably that it doesn't matter who you work with. And that couldn't be more farther from the truth, really. Who you work with will determine whether you have a successful program beyond ways you can measure as an advertiser. So I'd say the best way we counteract that is to really encourage our merchant partners to think of us as partners and work with us as partners. It's really quite amazing. The closer we work with a merchant, the more success we drive. It goes well beyond Brand Plus for most of our most successful partners. And that's partly because they're thinking of us as a partner and not just as a search publisher.
Great. Evan?
So I'd build on what Steve said, and maybe just slightly differently. I think the biggest misconception, or one of the biggest ones we see, is that I don't need a search policy. And that means either our search team does it and I don't have to deal with that, or I'm going to let anyone do it and I'm not going to have any terms and regulations around it. And the truth is, both of those ends of the spectrum are a bad decision as far as we see. You're either, as an affiliate manager, leaving money on the table because there's a lot of opportunity there, or you're completely ceding control over your brand and your customers on the other end. And so what we find oftentimes is, as we start to dig in a little bit and work with partners and advertisers, we can show them that, well, actually, sometimes upwards of 40% of the people who are searching are clicking on the paid ads, and if you're not in that world, you're leaving money on the table, and you're not taking control of the customer experience. You're not sending your consumers to a place where you know that they're going to go straight to your website as opposed to one of your competitors. You don't know what that brand experience is going to be like. So I think the conception of, I don't really need to deal with that, has two ends of the spectrum, and both of those are I would say, a bad way to start and a big misconception from our perspective.
Great. Thank you. Tony?
First, I'd like to thank George for leading the panel, and I'd like to thank CJ for having us. I'm going to dovetail off also something that Steve said, which leads into what I think the biggest misconception is, and it's what Steve said about search teams, agencies. We're all here because we are participating in the affiliate channel as a sales channel, and search is its own channel. And it's going to be important for all of us to understand how we can work and play together, and how it's important that the revenue that we generate is showing up in our channel. So what that leads, in my opinion, to a misconception is that all search is created equal. And the biggest thing that we hear is, we don't, if I'm dealing with an agency or an account manager, they don't allow search. Well, which part of search don't they allow? Which pieces, which components? And I think that that's really the misconception, because if you're working with, another thing Steve said, if you're working with a good partner, you're working with somebody who understands the space and understands the challenges that you might be up against, there are ways to find incremental business even within parameters of a search agency, even within parameters of your internal search team, and find ways that you can build your affiliate channel revenue, which is what we all want to do, without infringing or impacting the internal search team. And so that is a huge misconception, because search is not search, is not search, is not search, and it's not all created equal. And your program may not support search. Your program may have a huge opportunity for search. It's about finding that area out, and that takes conversation, and that's why having good partners is important.
Absolutely, and that actually comes to the next 2 bullet points. It's a 2-pronged story. It's all about partnerships and then testing. So I want to touch about partnerships first, and we'll kind of see who wants to chime in. I'm going to leave this very open. Tony, you mentioned it's really about finding the right partner, finding the right opportunity. All 3 of you have to look at thousands of opportunities, not only in CJ, but across the board, across all of affiliate. How do you vet for those opportunities? Is there anything you look for, any special thing about these programs that really come to light?
I'll just chime in quickly. The one thing I've learned, this is my 9th CJU, and so I've been doing this for a long time, and the one thing I know with 100% certainty is that I can't tell you what programs are going to be successful. The ones I think are going to do great usually sometimes don't, and the ones that I think are going to do terribly blow the doors off. And so what we've come to understand is that you can look at some basic metrics. You can look at EPCs, and you can kind of look at, how many bars does this advertiser have in CJ, and you can kind of decide where you want to target out of the thousands of advertisers that you have available to you. But the reality is, until we have a conversation with you as the agency or the merchant partner and understand what you're doing internally and what you're doing right now, that's the only time we can really tell you if and how we can help you. And there are a lot of people we can't help, and that's okay. We come to CJU and we hang out, and maybe next year, and maybe there's some new opportunities. But it really comes down to that collaboration and that conversation about where are the gaps and how can we help you fill them. So vetting is hard. You can kind of gauge it, but it really takes that conversation. And so I'm much more inclined to work with a merchant or an agency or a partner that's willing to talk and willing to have that conversation. I'm much more open to that, and because then we can find out if there's areas that work together to be mutually beneficial.
Yeah, I'll follow up on that. I think the metrics are hard. It's not easy to pick one spot that's going to work. Places that are competitive, where a 10% lift would make a big difference for a merchant or an advertiser, that sort of sticks out for us because they have budget to spend. They're trying to compete against other players in the market. But for us also, what's extremely important is you talk about partnerships. We look at partnerships in a I don't know, in a different light, but in a kind of 360 way. We want to make sure that we have a great partnership with the person sitting across the table from us, so the advertiser and us directly. We need to make sure that the advertiser, the affiliate manager, has partnerships internally within their organization in order to be able to manage search across multiple different silos within their teams. We want to make sure that we have partnerships with other people, so whether it's Steve or someone else in the landscape who may also be playing side by side with us. Because the truth is, for us, everyone on this stage is really trying to figure out how to help an advertiser grow their affiliate channel sales. And the best sales always occur if there's multiple people all rowing in the same direction, both on the advertiser side and on the publisher side. So when we vet opportunities, sometimes it's about metrics, but a lot of times it's about the quality of the partnerships and the trust, both on the internal side and externally with other people who might, at first blush seem like they're competitive to us, but really, how do we find a way that we can all work together and lift the tide for everybody?
Yeah, I think that's a great place to take off from is the whole idea of we like to start with the merchant and try to understand what are their goals, what are they trying to accomplish. The merchants that just want to check a box, we have paid search or have paid search affiliate, we tend to find those aren't the most successful. We prefer the merchants. We had a merchant in our office just a couple weeks ago for a full day of planning for next year. Planning for next year, and it was the merchant was there, their agency was there, their internal search team was there. We had a very collaborative meeting and came out of the meeting with some specific tests that we're able to do because of our technology and because of our commitment to that partner. If that was a partner we hadn't been working with for 3 or 4 years, that would have been a lot harder, because then when we do the test, our volume could go down as a result of it. But because of it's a partnership, we trust them and they trust us. We know at the end of the day that we're shooting for the same common goal, and that's really what it's all about for us.
Do you find it easier when the person who's running affiliate is also running search, or do you find it more difficult?
Yeah, it's much easier when they're either running both, or they at least report into the same person, so that it's not the my search team said this or my search team said that. It's much more collaborative, and we actually prefer them to be at least under the same group, if not the same person.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, it's really making sure everyone's pointed in the same direction, and occasionally you can get, especially if you're dealing with a larger advertiser, sometimes internally their goals may not line up entirely, and that can create some tension in the execution, and it is all about the details and the execution. So trying to smooth out those bumps as much as possible is important.
Now, from the agency side and the in-house teams, I know, Tony, you run into a lot of that on the display URL side. What are maybe some tips that the audience can learn maybe from you about how to deal with agencies or internal teams? What are the best ways that affiliate managers, if they're not under the same team or running both under their division, what are the most optimal ways to work with it or pitch it?
Well, that's a very difficult question to answer, because you're dealing with personal dynamics, unfortunately. You asked the question about if it's the same person or if they're reporting up to the same people. That's all true, and I would agree 100%. The other piece of the puzzle is that if you have a good working relationship with the SEM, even if they're not under the same umbrella, but you can talk to them and you can communicate with them and you're working together towards a goal. But it's a struggle, because at the end of the day, everybody wants the revenue in their own channel. And everyone thinks that that should be in their channel, and everybody's is concerned about making sure that no revenue is leaking from their channel into another channel, and I get that. So it really comes down to, again, and I can't say this enough, it's the communication. You have to have that open communication. And frankly, I've had conversations with people where they say, my search team X, they won't let, and it's very, the words I can hear them using are very definitive. They won't let us, we're not allowed to. And so that tells me that there's not a really collaborative relationship going on, and I kind of get the feeling at that point that this probably isn't going to go anywhere. The most successful calls are the ones where the affiliate manager gets the search person on the phone at the same time. And the three of us have a conversation, and we can understand what the search person is doing, and we can convey to them what we intend to do. And many times when we have the opportunity to tell them what we're actually going to be doing, you hear oh, okay, well, that'll be all right, because they realize that we're looking for incremental and not to take away. So that's the key. If you think you want to pursue search as a channel and you think it's going to be a difficult challenge, item number one is to have a conversation and get the search person on board right away, right at the beginning, and get them comfortable with it, with you, with the idea, and with the person you're choosing to be your partner in that endeavor.
Right. Okay. So now that we got the partnerships in place, we potentially got you on the phone with the client, with their search team. Now we talk about testing. I love that word. People tend to love the word test. It's not non-committal to a point. How do you guys like structuring a test? What does a test look like in your respective search verticals?
So it depends is the answer, obviously, what you're trying to test. You've heard everyone say here it's all about what the goals are, right? So what are we trying to achieve, and what are the different ways what are the different levers we can pull? who else is in the playing space that we need to be cognizant of and respectful of. If we have to work with an agency or an internal team, where are the clear spaces that we're going to be testing, and what are the defined metrics that we're going to be measured on, right? So is it traffic? Is it conversion rate? Is it number of conversions? Is it total dollars? What's the thing that's most important to you right now as a business, and let's optimize into that. Because there's all different levers you can pull in search, just like in any other marketing. And unless we're all clear on what we're shooting for, it's very difficult at the end of the day to know whether or not you were successful, or more importantly, I would say, in the middle of the test, to start iterating around something to get better at it. So for us, it's understanding the space and understanding the measurement is probably the most important two things.
Yeah, I'd say it's interesting. I use the word test, and I also use the word experiment. And what I find is that most of the time we're doing experiments versus testing, right? Testing generally has what's the goal, what's the prescribed outcome, what's the data that's going to determine. It's got some type of rubric, if you will. An experiment tends to be much more basic research. We're working with a new merchant. The campaign went live last week, and they're calling it a test. And so great. What's the test? Well, we're testing whether we like it. So that's great, right? I love knowing how I'm going to be judged, right? Are they going to like it? It's a tough one. It's really tough, to sit in the shoes of the campaign manager or the partner manager, which is my job at times, and say, well, gosh, that's really not very conclusive. We really prefer, if there's two types of tests, right? We prefer that if you're going to test, let's say, one publisher against another publisher, that it's really clear what's being tested and what the framework of that is. We think there's often better times to choose who to work with than doing a straight-out test. But if it is a test like that, then it's really important to have apples and oranges, right? So in one case, we were doing a test, and we had a restricted list of keywords that we could bid on. And halfway, once the other publisher got involved, we did some searches and found they were on terms that were on the restricted list that you weren't allowed on. And you're in a tough position in our shoes. It's like, well, are we tattling on them? Well, no, not really. We're just trying to point out that the test isn't really quite fair, right? So, and what that really ultimately means ends up being that it goes back to trust and partnerships, right? Tests are not always going to yield the best partner. They're often going to yield the most clever and most devious partner if you're testing two publishers against each other. The other type of test, the test that we prefer, is the one like we're doing now with one of our partners, where after a day of meetings, we came up with 4 tests to do before Q1, and we're the only publisher they work with, and it's us and their search team, and we're really testing. Right? We're trying to figure out what will happen to costs if we do this, what will happen to click-through rate if we do this, and what will happen to conversion rate if we make this change. And those are way more effective tests, in my opinion.
I think this goes back to what I said earlier about search, not equal search, not equal search. You look through the CJ list of merchants, and clearly there's a huge disparate type, different verticals, different industries, different sizes of organizations, different experience in the space. I mean, you have some programs that have open PPC policies. Basically, any of us can do anything we want at any time. And then you have ones that are very restrictive, and there's just no way they're ever going to allow a search partner in the network. Everything's closed off. And you have everything in between. And so the question really comes down to, I have partners that don't have the budget to run their own trademark terms. Now, we all know we need to do that. I mean, we all know that we need to be on those terms. If they don't have the search budget or the search capability to do that, then that could be a component of the test. That's not the majority. That's probably the minority, but it's out there. So for us, designing the test is as individualized as the merchant we're working with. In other words, once I understand what we're dealing with, then I can say this is what I suggest for a test. On a very general level, we ask for a certain amount of time, usually 60 to 90 days, to prove something out. But as terms of what the actual specs are, it's very dependent upon who you are and what program you're running and how much search budget you have. Some people have a limited search budget. Some people have an unlimited. Some people say they have an unlimited search budget, but when you dig into it, you realize that's not entirely true. And so it really comes down to that. But I think the one thing that I heard about a test is it needs to be iterative. And so just because we agree to a test over a certain time period, people need to understand that we need to be able to modify the parameters of the test if they're making an impact in a negative way. This is all about mutual growth on both sides. So if my test is running and there's a negative impact, then we need to be able to move quickly and change and adjust. And I think when people understand that you're willing to do that, it kind of opens up the door to allowing more things.
Now, part of some of the tests and experiments that I've seen in the network as they've been negotiated run around CPC costs and bid caps. What are your opinions on the effectiveness of those?
Wow, that goes back to it depends, right? I think there's better ways to manage paid search than doing any type of cap at all, by focusing on goals, right? If your goal is to drive only incremental revenue from a paid search affiliate, and we know that, then clearly that means you're in the number 1 spot and we're in the number 2 spot, right? We don't need bid caps for that. We don't need position caps. We don't need reporting. We really just need to understand the goals and have a partnership where we're rewarded for those goals. If that's what a merchant wants, we would much I that type of scenario. There's a lot you can do. Search is very, very complicated. If you think back to your slide and think back, I have the fortune of having done search now for 12 or 13 years. I don't build the campaigns myself anymore, fortunately, but we've got way better people for doing that now. The complexity of it has grown dramatically. It's just way more complex. With that is the ability to manipulate as well, right? It takes Google about a year to catch up to the latest manipulation, and sometimes if they don't. So it's really, really tricky to start using things like bid caps as a mechanism, because there's really not such a thing in Google. It doesn't exist. And anybody wants to debate that with me, I'd love to sit down in front of a whiteboard and discuss why there really is no such thing as a bid cap today. There was 10 years ago, right? There definitely was in Yahoo 10 years ago, right? So it's really, really dangerous to start having policies and using policies as a means to enforce what we're trying to accomplish.
So I'd say I agree and disagree a little bit. I think the truth of the matter is that search costs and those bids is, in my mind, probably one of the largest challenges that faces this industry in the affiliate space right now. And it complicates everything because as costs go up, it becomes more difficult as an affiliate manager to have search if you have an internal team that is also competing with you, or not competing, but competing with your publishers. There's a huge challenge there, and it's net zero for both people, right? Google wins a lot, and the internal search team loses, and the publishers lose, and the affiliate manager loses. So I think that's a big issue. I think how you control those caps, and I agree 100% that there is no such thing as a bid cap, because there are probably hundreds, if not more, ways that sneaky publishers can get around those. But I also think that there is an absolute need to control those costs, because it's imperative for success, right? The way that an affiliate search program will succeed is the same way that an internal search program and an agency search program will succeed, is that you can acquire customers for less than the money that you're going to make off that customer. And quite frankly, Google doesn't really care about that. If you keep bidding and bidding, they're going to be just as happy. So I agree with Steve in the sense that it's very difficult, almost impossible sometimes to manage. But I'm not sure if I disagree, but I would say that putting focus on managing that is probably the number one priority that we stress with our partners, and that we hear from them because they're hearing it from their internal teams as well.
Yeah, no, I'm not saying we should ignore costs, but I'm saying there's potentially way more effective ways to manage the costs. And we do it with the partners that we work with all the time, and really keep costs down for everybody.
Yeah.
There's no whiteboard here, so Steve and I can't get into our discussion about bid caps today, and that's not the title of the session. But I disagree a little bit, and maybe it's because our model's a little bit different, but here's why. Google's a black box, and no matter what you read about of the auction model and how it works, it's the only people that really understand how that works is Google, and we understand that. The difference is that at its very basic level, when you deal with quality scores of ads and quality scores of landing pages and click-through rates of ads and bids, at its very core level, those are the levers that you can pull. And yeah, sure, there can be partners that are out there that are doing things that they shouldn't be doing. And frankly, those are the people you shouldn't be working with. And so you have to rely on a lot of trust. And who do you trust? Well, there's a lot of OPMs out there that have worked with people. There's the CJ folks that have worked with people. And they can tell you who are the good players and who are the bad players and who are the we're not quite sure players. And if you're working with somebody good, then there has to be a mutual level of trust. So having said that, then, we talk about bid caps. And when you're dealing with your search team and the way we operate, we're sending traffic directly to your page. We're sending it to the landing page of the merchant. We're sending it directly into your site where we know it's going to convert the best. It's not a better model than what they have. It's just a different model. But we have the same landing page. For all intents and purposes, we have very similar ad copy because we want that ad to generate interest and a sale. And so when you get down to its very core level, if your search team is uncomfortable with search and they say, look, we don't want this to raise our CPCs. I know it won't, but we need to convince them that it won't. And if they're going to be happier setting a cap on my maximum bid, in other words, I go into Google and they say, look, IamWave can test this out, but we don't want you bidding over 50 cents. Well, number one, you can trust that if you tell me that, that's what I'm going to do. Number two, your search team's going to build a level of confidence because their average bid is over 70 cents, so they know they're way ahead of us, in which case, if there is any overlap, we lose, and that's good. 9 times out of 10, when people give us bid caps, they are so far over what I'm bidding anyway that it's not really a relevant issue, but it makes everyone have a comfort level moving forward. And if you can build that comfort level moving forward, then you can build trust in a new relationship, and then you can start to work forward. So from that standpoint, yes, obviously people can game the system. Those are the people you shouldn't be working with. If your search team is concerned, let's talk about a bid cap. If it's going to make them feel better, if they're bidding 50 cents, I'll bid 40. Because I'm looking for incremental business anyway. I don't want to take the traffic that your search team's generating. I don't want that business. And because I'm going directly to your site, the landing page quality score is equal. The ad copy, for all intents and purposes, is at least equal, unless I'm writing better ads than you are, in which case then you probably should write better ads. And our click-through rate was probably going to be very close. So, max bids do have a function in that aspect. And so we don't always get them. We sometimes get them. But, excuse me, when we do, it just puts that level of comfort, and then everyone can see the test run. They can see the affiliate sales come in. They can see their CPCs on the internal side stay flat, and then everyone's happy. That's what it's all about. You got to make everybody along that path happy so that we can enter into the space and build affiliate revenue.
You're talking about really that partnership and that communication, especially when you're talking about making everybody happy and on the same page and getting everybody in the room. How often do you communicate with your partners, the ones that you have negotiated rights for and have the access to do search for them? How often do you speak to those advertisers?
As much as possible.
Yep.
I mean, as often as they'll take my call. No, I mean, it's the truth, right? We talked about testing, we talked about experimenting. The one thing that, I haven't been in it nearly as long as these other two gentlemen, but the one thing that is without a doubt a certainty is that it is changing every minute. and what worked yesterday doesn't work today, and what works today is not going to work tomorrow. We are always making sure that we are close in contact. And it may be seasonality, it may be special items, special sales, special promotions, it may be changes in internal policy, it may be changes in consumer demand, right? We haven't even talked about the shift to mobile at all on this stage yet, but there's all sorts of things. So we need to be in touch all the time. Sometimes those calls are very quick and they're just to review, here's what's working, we're going to do more of it. Sometimes those calls last a whole day and it's, how are we going to plan this next year out? So it's as much as possible for the greatest success. And also, I would echo, I think what was said here earlier, which is not only just the people who I have direct contact with, but as many of their constituents from their side of the table as we can bring into the conversation, the better off we are.
Yeah, I'd say it depends on the merchant, it depends on the season, it depends on the space, but there's some that will talk to you daily. We have dedicated partner managers and they have dedicated accounts. And then we have a search team that's dedicated as well. So sometimes for the weekly calls, we'll have the search team involved. Aside from the daily as needed and the weekly calls, we like to get together face-to-face a couple times a year with our biggest partners. It's not always a half day or a whole day meeting, but sometimes it's 3 or 4 times a year at conferences, and sometimes there's more casual get together. We want to make sure that they know that if they need anything, they can just pick up the phone, right? If email's not the best form of communication at a particular time, just pick up the phone. So, whenever is needed is probably the short answer.
Okay. All right. And then the last part, you were talking about mobile and really talking about what's next in the search landscape. Let's talk about mobile. What is going on? We've seen, I think Google has officially released that as of last month, there's more mobile searches than desktop searches for the first time ever. How is that affecting your search campaigns?
It's funny. Google comes into our office a lot. We have a big Google team, and I don't have to look at the first slide because every time it's a graph of mobile searches versus desktop searches. I like to then throw back at them, well, let's talk about conversion rate on mobile versus desktop. So I think the reality is that mobile is, in our experience, and we have data that bears this out as well, a lot of mobile search is incremental. So in some cases, the desktop searches that are declining are desktop searches that didn't used to convert, right? They're earlier in the funnel, they're browsers, they're searching for less specific terms. So our conversion rate on desktop has actually gotten better while there's been a shift in an increase in mobile. What's next is we think that will continue, but we think we'll start seeing more and more conversions on mobile as well, especially with the merchants that start doing more in-store. Mm-hmm. And that's true more on the retail side than obviously other categories or other segments. But I think that's probably the most what's next of all the what's next.
Tony?
I would agree with almost all of that. I think that while the mobile searches are going up, we have not seen a commensurate increase in conversion. And so for us, while we do look at mobile as a strategy for some of our partners, let me say it this way, it's very difficult to understand in the interface what partners are mobile certified and what partners are not mobile certified. At least for us it has been. And so we tend to not even attack mobile unless we have a definitive relationship and we understand that they do have mobile tracking online. One of the big changes that Google made is when they sort of said that we're no longer going to differentiate between a desktop search and like a tablet device or a mobile device, and it's just all the same. And that is what it is, and that's what they decided to do. And they gave you some opportunities to decrease your mobile bids to a certain percentage. But for the most part, we back off on mobile until we are certain that the partner is certified to operate, to convert, and then we'll test. And then that's another test. That's another item where we can look at sending traffic through that channel, watching how that converts separate from the desktop traffic. But I do agree. I think that the mobile searches are only going to go up. People are becoming untethered, and that's where they're doing their business. It'd just be nice to see an increase in conversions to go along with that. I think that's coming. I don't know if it'll be tomorrow or a year from now, but I do think that's coming. So if you're not mobile certified, you probably want to start working on that.
7.
Yeah, I would add, so I would agree. Our data has also borne out that mobile is mostly incremental. We haven't seen desktop search take a nosedive, even though you see this graph. We get the same presentation probably. But the difference in mobile is significant. Conversion, much, much lower. From our perspective, intent is significantly different. And that's the problem that we're focusing on right now. How do you solve that question of what is the user intent when they're searching on mobile, and how does that differ by day of week, by keywords they use, by geography, sometimes even by time of day? How do those things impact the offer you show them, the ad you run, the landing page you send them to, the conversion flow, all of those things? And there's a huge difference also by age group, right? So we have some merchants that are predominantly mobile now because their clientele is predominantly 25 and under. And they have adjusted to that very quickly by offering a lot more mobile opportunities, both for publishers and for their consumers. And that includes, importantly, opportunities to convert on an in-store offer and be paid through the affiliate channel and get credited, more importantly, through the affiliate channel for that sale. I think that's a huge area that right now affiliate managers are getting the short end of the stick, to say it politely on. They're driving a ton of interest and traffic. If they are doing search in mobile, they're driving a ton of foot traffic through in-store, through search, and they don't get credited for it. And that's an area that we work pretty closely with our partners on trying to solve. What is that intent? How do you best service that intent? And then finally, how do you take advantage of the in-store opportunity? Because as an affiliate manager, or if I were an affiliate manager, that'd be something I thought about a lot, is I'm having a lot of my consumers get credited to another channel who may be, John sitting next to me, and that's not coming through my line item anymore.
Great. So I want to thank all 3 of you for being up here. And I want to just talk about the new days of affiliate search. It's completely the opposite of where it was 10 years ago. We're talking about clearer policies, better communications and open communications with your partners, and making sure you understand that everything surrounds a partnership.